All right, let's get into it. Today, we are unpacking one of the most talked about, most polarizing stocks out there, BMNR. This is a company that people either seem to love or really doubt. So we're going to break down the huge bet that's at the very heart of this thing. So you've probably felt it. The market's been pretty shaky lately, right? And that puts a ton of pressure on anything considered a risk asset, especially crypto. And smack dab in the middle of this whole storm is BMNR, a stock that seems to feel every single tremor in the market, maybe even more so. So what is the real story here? Is this company just getting tossed around by general market fear, or is there something bigger going on?
Okay, here's the game plan. First, we'll talk about the market chaos and how it's slamming the stock. Then, we get to the core of it, BMNR's massive bet on Ethereum. We'll also explore this supercycle theory that the bulls are banking on, cover the very real reasons for caution, and then wrap it all up with how this really just becomes a pure test of an investor's conviction.
So let's start with that big picture. Because honestly, to get what's happening with BMNR's price day to day, you first have to understand the wave of fear that's been washing over the entire market. You've probably heard this saying before, and it is classic market behavior. When some of the big tech giants report earnings that disappoint Wall Street, this wave of fear just spreads like wildfire. Investors immediately start to de-risk, and what's the first thing they sell? The stuff they see as speculative. That means growth stocks and crypto get hit the hardest. And here's the thing, it's not always about that specific company's performance, it's just about the overall mood. In an environment like this one, caution just completely takes over. Nobody wants to be the one to catch a falling knife, right? So a lot of investors just sit on their hands, and all those automated stop losses start getting triggered, one after another. This creates a domino effect of selling that can absolutely punish a stock like BMNR, no matter how solid its long-term story might be. But this is where the whole story pivots. Because the real bull case for BMNR, it has almost nothing to do with these daily price swings. Nope, it is built on something else entirely. And you really have to get this next part. BMR is not a trading firm. They're not trying to perfectly time the dips and peaks. Their entire corporate strategy, you can boil it down to one simple, relentless mission: buy and hold a gigantic treasury of one single digital asset. And that asset is Ethereum. We're talking 4.2 million ETH. Look, this isn't just some line item on their balance sheet. For all intents and purposes, it is their balance sheet. This number right here is the anchor. It's the single most important piece of data you need to understand this company. Pretty much everything else is just noise. Okay, so this brings us to a really key concept, net asset value, or NAV. The idea is pretty simple. What are all the company's assets actually worth? Well, if the market sells off BMNR stock because it's scared, but the value of that 4.2 million NFT ETH stays the same, a gap opens up. The stock suddenly starts trading for less than the value of the digital gold it's holding in its vault. So the foundation is the ETH. But what has the bulls so convinced that the price of ETH itself is set to climb? Well, this is where we zoom out and get into the really big picture theory, the idea of a financial supercycle.
Now you hear supercycle thrown around a lot, but this isn't just about prices going to the moon. The theory here is that we are watching a fundamental merger of two different universes: TradFi, traditional finance, with its banks and stock markets, and DeFi, the whole new world of decentralized finance. The lines are blurring, and the idea is that a completely new hybrid financial system is being born.
And this is the potential rocket fuel. Just try to wrap your head around this number for a second. We are talking about an astronomical amount of money just sitting in retirement accounts. If regulators ever give the green light for even a tiny fraction of this capital to flow into digital assets, it would be an absolute game changer. It could create a demand shock unlike anything we've ever seen.
So how does that $12.5 trillion actually get into crypto? Well, a giant pension fund can't just go open a Coinbase account. This slide lays out the exact problem BMNR is built to solve. These big institutions, they need a wrapper, something that looks and feels and trades like a normal stock, but gives them that juicy crypto exposure underneath. BMNR is trying to be that perfect strategic bridge. They handle all the messy custody and regulatory stuff so that a fund manager can get exposure with just one click.
Okay, so that's the bull case, and you have to admit, it's a big one. But of course, it is not all upside. There are some very serious risks here that you absolutely cannot ignore. Let's get into the bear case. The number one concern, the single metric that has the bears totally laser-focused, all comes down to one word: liquidity. Or, to be more specific, the stock's trading volume.
And you can see it right here. This chart shows a pretty significant drop in how much stock is being traded each week since those highs back in November. Now, why does that matter so much? Well, remember how BMNR buys more ETH? They do it by selling their own stock. If there aren't enough buyers out there for their stock, if that liquidity dries up, they can't raise the cash they need without pushing their own share price down. It's a really serious headwind for their whole accumulation strategy.
So let's just quickly recap the big risks. A long, drawn-out crypto winter would obviously crush the value of their number one asset. The low liquidity we just talked about is a huge operational risk. The stock is still, at the end of the day, a hostage to the market's mood swings. And finally, yeah, BMNR might dominate its little corner of the market, but that whole market has gotten smaller. These are all very real things to worry about.
And all of this, it brings us to the final and maybe the most important piece of this entire puzzle, psychology. Because investing in a company like BMNR, well, it's more than just looking at charts. It is a true test of your own conviction.
You can basically see two completely different mindsets at war here. On one side, you have the fear-based investor. They're watching the ticker every 5 minutes, they get spooked by volatility, and they sell on the dibs. But on the other side, you have the high-conviction investor. They're trying to ignore all that short-term noise, they're focused on the underlying asset, that 4.2 million ETH, and they see price drops as a chance to dollar-cost average and buy more. This quote just perfectly captures that high-conviction logic. The argument is, hey, if the fundamental reason you invested in the first place hasn't changed, then a lower stock price is just a better deal. It completely flips the script, reframing a scary price drop into a massive buying opportunity. And what's wild is how the company's own leadership just leans right into this culture. You literally have the chairman of a public company using crypto slang like stacking and HODL. I mean, that's just completely unheard of in the traditional finance world. It's a massive signal to their investors that they aren't playing for next quarter's earnings, they are playing for the next decade.
So, at the end of the day, it really all boils down to this one question. Is BMNR a visionary company building the on-ramp to the future of finance, or is it just a massive, high-stakes casino bet on a single, super volatile asset? After looking at all the evidence, the answer to that probably says more about your own conviction than anything else.